What's your soldering iron of choice? We've got a cordless one from Portasol. We'll take a look at it when we get back. I'm Tim. You're watching Shop Tool Reviews. This is the Portasol Super Pro 125 soldering iron kit. Now this is a company out of Ireland. These tools are made in Ireland, and they've been making soldering irons for quite some time. So they know what they're doing. Now when I say cordless, we're not talking about battery operated. This is a gas powered or butane powered torch, butane powered soldering iron. But you can solder with it. You can also heat shrink. You can do various other things with it as well. It comes with multiple tips. So let's dive in and take a closer look at this. We'll look at all the details. We'll talk about some of the features. We'll also fuel it up, actually use it. Then we'll come back and talk about pricing, where you can find these, as well as the warranty. Let's get started. What we see here is the Portasol Super Pro 125 soldering iron kit. So it comes in this plastic case. And what you get in the kit, instruction manual, always super cool. Looks like we've got a sponge that's dehydrated, and then several different tips. We get a cap, we get the actual torch itself. Looks like a little deflector on that as well. So this is as it comes, as you can see here. Some pretty cool features on this little gun. Obviously this is going to run off of butane. You see the tank down here where we can see it. And then up here, obviously that's just the blowtorch tip that's on there with the deflector, which would be great for heat shrinking, heating things up, great for that. And then it looks like we get several tips here as well. Now let's take a look here at the torch. Looks like we have two different switches here, a little stand. So this is actually the striker or the igniter, which I believe runs piezo, or the ceramic, whatever that is, that actually strikes an arc. And then we have an on-off switch here. And then we just pull this back to click to start it. Obviously only if there is fuel in it. As I mentioned, there's a stand, so we can kick that like that. It's a little kickstand. So that's a great idea, especially for a torch or for a soldering iron, because that tip is always hot. Once you get done using it, you can let it cool off like that. Or if you're in use, you can lay it down like that. You don't have to hike it up on something. The tips come off. You just remove this little thumb screw here. And it looks like it's got a little heat shield. And then the tip comes out. And then we can take one of these other tips, put it in there, and it's pretty much self-centers as you screw this on. So now we're ready to solder with that fine tip, which, by the way, I believe it comes with a 1mm, 2mm, 3mm, and 5mm kit. I think it's like 1.2, 2.3, and 4.8. Anyway, so I'm just going to call it a 1, 2, 3, and 5mm tip. And then it also comes with a like a hot knife. So this is like a little V-shaped blade there, so where you can heat it up and you cut foams and things like that. That's great for doing synthetic cutting. And then it looks like a short blowtorch tip, and then the long one here, as well as the deflector. Let's go ahead and add a little water to our sponge. That should swell up quite nice. Oh, I think that's way too much. Nothing like overdoing it a little bit. I should clean that up. Okay, now we've got our sponge wet. And let's go ahead and fuel this up. You can see here at the bottom or at the end of the torch that we see that translucent tank. So you should be able to see fuel in there. There's not any fuel in it right now, so we don't see any. But this is also where you can throttle the flame. You can throttle the soldering iron. So right here we have a marker. And this is the plus side, this is the minus side. So this is wide open and this is low. I'd probably put a little black mark right there on that little mark so it doesn't get confused with these other two, but still easily throttle that flame throttle the heat as to where you need it. All right, to fill this, we want to stand it near straight up, and we're going to take our fuel and we're just going to insert it there onto the needle. And And we want to hold it there until we have gas come out the top. Okay, so now we've got gas coming out the top, and now we can see fluid in there now. So you can see in that translucent tank now, we can see fluid that we have in there. And let's put our blower tip back on there. Pretty self-explanatory how these things go together. And as I mentioned, they kind of self-center on there. And so I believe that is on. And let's see here. Let's turn that all the way up. Well, when you're clicking and clicking and it's glowing red hot, don't stick your finger on the end of it. So basically I clicked it a couple of times, didn't think it was actually burning, and it's going quite well. So yeah, I've got plenty of heat coming out the end of that. Yeah, you can see that there, fogging all that up. And then if I want to turn this off, turn it off, and we'll see that cool back down. Turn it on, you can hear the gas run. And there we are, we've already got a glowing tip again. Turn it off, it goes out. Now I'm curious if while it's hot, yeah, that pretty much self-ignited. While it was hot, I just had to flip that switch back on. I didn't have to click the igniter, and we're back going again. We can use our kickstand and let that cool down as we need it to. I'm going to let this cool down a second. I'm going to switch that tip out. We're going to go to a soldering tip, and we'll solder some wires. Okay, so what we have here is this is a pigtail from a blower motor in a GM truck or SUV, which is pretty typical that they get a bad connection and they start melting like this. People keep replacing blower motors thinking it's the blower motor, and it's not the blower motor. It is the actual plug for the pigtail or the actual plug. Now, you can replace the kind of whole wiring in there, but you don't really need to. It just needs that tip. So we'll go ahead, and I've got a new tip here. As you can see, pre-melted. Hopefully we won't melt that one. And we'll leave it a little more than we need. So let's go ahead and cut this one off right here. And then we know that black is going to be orange, red is going to be purple. So red to purple, black to orange. We'll go ahead and trim this back. And trim these back. Bring in our little third hand here. That'll solder flux. We're going to go ahead and trim these back just a bit more. Probably definitely overkill, but that'll give us plenty of wire to work with. Go ahead and slide our heat shrink over here. Better to have too much than the too little. We're going to change out our tip to the soldering tip, and I believe this is the 2 millimeter. I'm going to go ahead and start this up, and we can see it glowing red right there. Looks like the tips are pre-tinned. Go ahead and put me some flux on there. Yep. Looks like it's already melting the solder. It didn't take long. And make sure that the solder is flowing in the wires and not just on the tip. Now we're starting to flow into the wires. Clean up the tip a bit. Not the prettiest connection doing it that way. Let's slide our heat shrink over, and we'll hit it with some hot air here shortly. Typically, I would solder a connector on here, but I just wanted to solder this. Now let's crank up our soldering iron again. And you see, since it was hot, it already started up. I didn't have to click it. We see it glowing red right there. Yep, it's already melting solder. Pretty cold in our shop. This wire is pretty cold as well. Which, by the way, a good trick to kind of add heat to your joint is to run a bigger tip, because then it retains more heat from the gun. So in other words, especially in big wires, in larger wires, it's not robbing that heat out of the tip as bad, because that tip is retaining more heat. Starting to flow a little bit, yeah. Yeah, there's flowing now. And I'll turn it off, leave it on the kickstand, dress it up just a bit. And that's not coming apart. It is not the prettiest job, I understand that. Now let's change out the tip, which, by the way, that's going to be hot. Do not recommend changing a hot tip out like that. But there we have it, and we can put our deflector on. And now let's see if we'll restart. Oh yeah, it's quick work. That works really good. So it works really good. Again, don't judge my my butt splice solders there. Definitely not something that I'm proud of. Just so you know, we'll solder something else here in a moment. But that will work for this blower motor for now. Okay, let's do a little better soldering job this time. I've got some cleaner wire, not some old used heavy stuff. And we'll just go ahead and dip it here in the flux, and then we'll go ahead and twist her up. So there we've got some twisted up wire, and we'll go ahead and start up our torch. And we're going. And as I mentioned, on that larger wire, I probably should have ran a bigger tip. There we go. Looks like it's starting to melt now. Yeah. don't want to over solder our wires. As soon as it starts to flow, yeah, there we go. See it flowing in the wire. See it flowing. And that should be good. Now that's the way a solder joint should be done. Yeah, so it's flowing all through the wire. Yeah, that's not going to pull apart. So unlike this old nasty wire here that took a while to get some heat into it, but as we mentioned, it'll work. The Portasol, really handy little tool. This little Portasol soldering iron is very handy. You can see how small it is. It's not much bigger than my hand. Still heats up very quickly and is able to do some pretty decent gauge wire. Now, don't judge the soldering iron by my hack job on that first soldering. That was some old heavy wire, then soldering it, trying to solder it to some new wire again. I could have done a better job. I should have used a larger tip to retain more of that heat. But anyway, the soldering iron does very well. Very easy to use, easy to fuel up, and again, very handy. No battery to worry about. Just make sure it's got fuel in it, and you pull the trigger and it lights up. I also like the fact that once it was still hot and you turned it back on, it would reignite itself without having to hit the ignition button. Now, another cool feature on this is it comes with a cover as well. So if it is hot, you can slide it on, and you see it actually slides down and keeps the switch in the off position. So once you put that cap on, there's no way for it to ignite because it's kept in the off position. So pretty cool idea, and it can still expend some of the heat out there through that grill opening there. So cool idea with that cover. Also, nice kit. Love the multiple tips in there. So we get broad tips, narrow tips, pointed tips, as well as the blower tips to blow hot air. And that worked really well. Once we turned it on and actually used it to do the heat shrink, that happened very quickly. Again, love the size of this. $75 for this kit. So this is the Super Pro 125 kit. You can get this for $75 on Amazon. I believe it's a 1-year warranty as well. As I mentioned, made in Ireland. So check it out. We'll have a link in the description. Hey, would you keep track of us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter? If you don't mind, would you hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already? And by all means, if you hated our video and you think my soldering was horrible, well then let us know in the comments. And if you need to, give us that thumbs down as well. Have a great day and keep smiling.